Hello, 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 hello. Thank you all for taking the time out today to join us for the See Us podcast. Shannon Hughes. Let me see if I know how to work these little gadgets and gadgets here. I'm cool. I'm Shannon Hughes. I am going to be joined today by Miss Cecilia Coleman. But before we get there, I want to as a reminder, what this podcast is for. It is a space for people in our general area, so Allegheny County, to be heard and seen, particularly those of us who are typically marginalized, silenced, and erased. This podcast got started in the name and honor of Leroy Powell. Leroy was 15 years old from Duquesne in 2014 when he was murdered. He was a witness to an attempted murder turned infanticide, and his witness statement was played on the 11 o'clock news. And he was shortly after that, his life was taken. That was the direct responsibility of our news media, and that stuck out to me because it just showed me how much our lives are not taken into consideration, right? Like they could have done so much to not let that happen, and this was a child, so it should have never happened in the first place. So I definitely want to uplift Leroy Powell's name. Always, always, always remember that child. I want to, before we get started, I also want to remind us of Miss Janiyah Dawson. Janiyah is a 15-year-old girl who has recently gone missing. We did a emergency podcast on Wednesday, I believe it was, and I'm going to put this up here. And please do, reach out to her mother, Josie Dennison. She can be easily found on Facebook. We're looking for a safe return. We are not looking to criminalize Zamaya if she is in fact being held or harbored by Zamaya. These are all children. Zamaya is a child, just like Janiyah is a child. So we want to treat them accordingly. Our concern is their safety, both of their safety. Just want to make mention of that. So I would like to introduce, like, at least the conversation around Joe Hall. Now, Joe Hall and myself were actually the same age. He'll be 32. I turned 32 in January. But though we're the same age, I had no idea about his story until very recently. And it's such a weird circumstance. And I'm going to allow, his mother to tell the story because I don't want to, first of all, jumble it. But second of all, it is so incredibly insane to me that I definitely wanted to have Miss Cecilia Coleman on, his mother. And so I'm going to add her here. Miss Cecilia, hello, how are you?
I'm doing good, considering. Thank you very much, Shannon.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you, Miss Cecilia, for joining me today and joining us. I definitely want to hear about your son's story. But before we get into that, can you tell us, like, where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana, down south, deep south.
How did you get here?
Long story. Well, my father was going to Pitt, which brought us up north. He ended up teaching at Pitt, so it just brought us parents.
It's always school work. You end up here. It's always school work.
Yes.
All right. So can you tell us a little bit about your son? What's his personality? What was he interested in? Anything like that?
Okay. This been 15 years. It's been a long, long journey. So this was in 2006. At the time, Joseph was a minor, just actually 17 years old, in high school, going to Allderdice. And he was the average young kid. He had a little license, so he was driving. He had little girlfriends, had a lot of friends, and but he was very active in his earlier years, playing football. He liked to wrestle, and he was my only child, so he might have a little spoiledness in him. Maybe that's my fault, but but he was a good kid, active. The normal, sometimes teenage um, fights that you get into in school, and one time, going through his adolescent teenage mood swings with mom, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Gotcha. So pretty much, normal kid.
Yes, because this happened at 17, so and he'll be 32 in September, so ain't but so much, by 17 that you can experience. In the last 15 years, unfortunately, he has been in prison due to a wrongful conviction, a wrongful arrest, and everything.
So can you tell us what happened 15 years ago, just about 15 years ago?
Oh, in 2006, a young man got shot in Homewood, and they call him Little J. People call my son Little J. I got a call, I was at work, that a young man that got shot, someone thought it was my son. So I went to the crime scene, thinking it was my son. It was a gold Carhartt coat on the sidewalk. And I knew my son had one, so I really thought it was my son at the time. Found out, make a long story short, that it wasn't my son. It was another young man. First name was James. He was also 17 at the time. Then from there, I'm thinking my son's a victim. But because I went to the crime scene inquiring about the young man that I thought was my son, and the police took information, all the pertinent information, they really took that information, and my son became a suspect, from victim to suspect in the very beginning. So it was a lot of little things that the cops, they was just gathering information, conjecture, guessing, and he became a suspect from there on.
And I just want to make sure I'm clear. How did he become a suspect? Like, was he tied?
Because I went to the crime scene and mentioned that I heard my son Joseph have got shot. The young man that was on it, because the crime scene was they had the casing shells all on, and the Carhartt coat was still on the ground. They just from me mentioning it, that's how initially he became a suspect.
So you mentioned his son's name, thinking he was a victim, and
Yes,
that became a suspect.
yes, 15 years ago, yes, and it went from there. Just
And so what happened? What happened there? So he was suspected of this crime. Was he anywhere near?
later on, as the case progressed, I had found out from young men in the streets that my son actually was nowhere around. When I went to my house, my son actually was there, and the news was on. This was around 5 o'clock. And we all looking at the news, and I was saying, I was just at that crime scene thinking, you got killed, boy. And he's like, no, Mom. He was home with his girlfriend at the time and one of my nephews. And it was just really like, but because I went to the crime scene, the detective still came to my house 2 days later for more questions. And then it's just from there, I mean, it was just really crazy. And from there, he just was a suspect because they had no suspect. And I guess because it was near a school, they really was trying to close the case.
So then what happened? What happened after that?
Well, then after that, because it's been so much, that was the very beginning. And through the years, it has been like witnesses came out. Because the young man that got shot was shot by somebody on foot. They were saying it was my son and a couple of his friends that was in the car that shot the young man. There's no truth in that. At the time, we didn't know the facts. Later on, we realized it was found out there was some young men on foot. It been 3 witnesses that came forward since then. We had an evidentiary hearing. Eyewitnesses that told the detectives what had happened. One witness, he had made a statement 15 years ago about what he seen. They withheld him for many years. This just came forward about 15 years later that we realized his exculpatory testimony was just withheld. So Commonwealth withheld evidence.
So 15 years ago, a young man.
Yes, a young man named Stephen. He was an eyewitness that actually seen the shooting about young men on foot that shot this young gal in Homewood. Not no drive-by car like the Commonwealth was trying to say. So, and from the very beginning, the case was bogus that they had.
Wow. So 15 years ago, your son went to prison for murder. His name was only brought up because you went there.
Yes.
Check to see if your son was the victim. And so now we're here 15 years later, and there was an evidentiary hearing that took place a little while ago.
Yes, in November.
And there, you said that there was this witness statement that was held. So they had that information for 15 years?
They had it all this time. And the young man, Stephen, he lived in Atlanta, so they had him on a projector screen, and he was telling the judge and my son's lawyer what he had stated 15 years ago about a statement. He said, but no one ever got in touch with him and never called him. And now I know why, because that would have just threw their whole case off, because they was focusing on a drive-by, but it wasn't. When the eyewitness has seen a young man on foot years ago, and he stated that, but they withheld that many, many years.
So what evidence did they have 15 years ago?
Actually, there's the prosecutor. When we had a trial, we had 3 different trials. His opening remarks was, I have no evidence on Joseph Hall. I have no DNA. I have no gun. I have no physical evidence on Joseph. So we in a court like, now this is the prosecutor saying this. So they never had no evidence. Never.
Wait, the prosecutor?
Yes. The prosecutor at the time was named Daniel Fitzsimmons.
For the count.
That was his opening remarks.
So what was his remarks after that? Like, what did they convict your son on?
They convict my son on, we had 3 trials, and they had this school police out of nowhere that popped up, call them like crackerjack witness, get on a stand and say that from the corner of his eyes, because they just don't want to put my son on the scene. He seen my son in the front seat of a car, but he didn't see no shooting. He just seen my son in the front seat of a car. So that's the only thing they had to at least try to put my son on the scene. Now, the front seat of this car that they took that day, it was no DNA in that car of my son. So they really had nothing. My son actually really got convicted on nothing.
So a person said from the corner of their eye that they saw a person in a moving vehicle?
Yes, in a moving vehicle that looks like my son Joseph. And he's supposed to know my son Joseph from Allderdice, because he was the security guard up there.
Wow.
And yes, I mean, this case is it's so much involved in the last 15 years that somebody would have to actually do a background and go to the beginning and see all the twists and turns. None of them make sense. Nothing solid of it.
So the security guard, did were they also saying that this person worked at a school in Homewood in Westinghouse, I'm assuming?
Yeah, he happened to was working at Westinghouse that day, supposedly. I don't know if that's even true. Because he came in, he wasn't there the first trial or the second trial. They both was hung. And then the third trial, the prosecutor, he pops up. And I'm like, where did he come from? You know, it was strange. The whole case has been strange, Shannon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Strange is a word. Strange is definitely a word. All right. So
unethical at its best.
Yeah. So who was the judge? Was it the same judge for all three trials?
Yes.
And who was it again?
It's Judge David Cashman.
Cashman. All right. And didn't you all just have another hearing recently?
Yes, in front of Judge David Cashman in November, the middle of November, we had an evidentiary hearing.
How did that go? What went on in that?
Well, it really proved, because my son's federal lawyer did a lot of footwork and homework, and he gathered up 2 witnesses along with the young man that seen the shooting 15 years ago, tracked him down in Atlanta. They all told what they said, which shows the innocence of my son, just shows that he has nothing to do with the killing of this young man, James. The judge, he was there physically. There have been a few times that he was nodding off and true story, Shannon, falling asleep during, and I was looking at the sheriff and the people like, listen, these are people giving testimonies of this young man that's sitting here. And look at our judge. Look at the honorable judge. Knocked out, just not. So I don't know if he was even active. Now, as far as Joe, if they apply the law, it looked really good for him. It just shows his innocent. Everything he said in the beginning, everything that I knew, it proves there was no evidence. It's just that we have a judge that seems to be biased.
Yeah. So at the evidentiary hearing, the judge was falling asleep while people were giving their witness statements. How is it supposed to?
And I have like 10 witnesses of that.
Wow. And so how is
going to write an affidavit? We have to, because I just don't think that's professional or ethical when a young person, a young man, woman, anybody that has a case and have an evidentiary hearing and a presiding judge seems to be inactive,
Yeah, I mean, I would have a hard time understanding how someone could rule on someone's life.
Yes, I know. Right. That's where we at now.
Wow. And so what has the past 15 years been like for Joe, for you, for y'all?
Well, the time he was a kid, he's a grown man now, deep voice, beard, everything, but he has spent his time in there doing a lot of reading, stay in a law library, very intelligent, very articulate. The terminology of the legal language, he has it. I mean, I call him little Johnny Cochran. He's brilliant. He stayed focused, stayed very positive. He was getting numerous visits among me and his friends and his grandparents and cousins until COVID, when they banned all visits. Still to this day, for the last year and a half. So, but he stayed focused. He know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. He knew that the truth would prevail, which it did, I'm just glad that he never became bitter or vulnerable in there, or just lost faith and hope. And a lot of it has come, I'm sure, from family support and friend support. I mean, he has a lot of support out here, which I do too. That helped me keep fighting, because I became like a lady pit bull, on this, and all the twists and turns made me really get into, because nothing was making sense, and I didn't want to seem like I was just a mom saying my son is innocent. He has no. I had receipts, and it was evidence from other people, organization, the Innocent Project, William Mucci, then the city paper, Bill O'Driscoll, and all them doing their own footwork and seeing, wow, this mother is right. This is just a a body of lies case. So I keep putting it out there, and I've been continuing putting it out there. And now we had the evidential hearing, and we got the 3 witnesses, still no physical evidence, and Joe will be coming home.
You said he will be.
Yes, he will be.
Is that decided? Or are we speaking that?
Yeah, I'm claiming this distant because he will be.
Yeah, I'm speaking that with you, because he should be. He should have came home. He should have never left home. But I mean, with the mountain of evidence that's always been there, but this new visibility of evidence that was withheld by the county, which is interesting.
Yes, that
alone, right? So I'm curious, what was so in 2006, myself and your son were the same age. Like, I'm a few months older than he is. And so 2006, I was heading off to college, graduating from high school, doing the things. I'm wondering, like, where was he in his life, and what was his trajectory at that time?
At that time, he was 11th grade at Allderdice. He was going to school. Just typical teenager at that time. But prior years, he was in a boys' choir called the Afro-American Institute that my parents have a music school in Homewood. They've been in business since 1982, almost 39 years, actually 39 years. So in coming up, he was involved in music, taking piano lessons, boys' choir. Also, my father taught karate, so he took karate for years. He was active. I had him baseball, football, piano. I just kept him active mentally, physically. And then I was saying, I want that diploma, which he still got me that diploma. I still got the diploma, but it's just unfortunate he had got in prison his last year. He still stayed in school. He didn't have to. But I was like, while you're here and you feed that brain and you just keep taking your classes. And then I went to his graduation at the prison, me, my mother, and his friend and his girlfriend at the time. And that was so symbolic to me to this day, because I know he didn't have to do this, but he did that for me. And in the meantime, I just stayed focused on looking for more loopholes. I found so many loopholes that it's hard to make sense of this. You can't make sense of things that when there's nothing there, nothing, no evidence, nothing, and no weapon here. It's just can't put a case together.
Right. And so what did your son, did he have like any goals, like anything he wanted to be that he's ever expressed at that time? I know it's pretty early in life, but I'm just curious.
He was always saying he was going to be an entrepreneur, a businessman, but these days all he talks about is coming home and being in the legal field and helping other wrongful convictions. He wants to like work in a lawyer's office, be an advocate, and I'm proud and I stand behind him on that, because I have a passion for that as well.
Yeah. I'm asking because I'm thinking about like just all that time that was stolen from him. Like, he's
stolen, good word.
He's been captive for 15 years of his life, and I'm thinking about like my past 15 years, and in that time, what has transpired, like so much of my life that got me to this point, and how much like his life is now has been taken by the state, for something that they didn't even have evidence for. Like there's no reason for that to have happened to your kid. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that everything happens for a reason. So like I mean, the power and the strength in that, but still, like there's no excuse for taking someone's life like that. I'm thinking about Terrell Johnson, who also he did 17 years wrongfully convicted. Um,
Terrell Johnson.
yeah,
Yes, I know that case. Yes.
yeah. Terrell,
Mhm.
very similarly, he did 17 years for a murder he did not commit. And it took 17 years. Teron Jenkins and Miss Sandra Cole, like shout out to all three of them fighting,
Yes.
and it got him out of there, because he didn't belong there. And very similarly, just like, lazy policing, lazy detective work, lazy judiciary system.
Yeah. We need Teron Jenkins.
Shout
Yeah.
out to Ron if you're there. Yeah, and so like your son on a similar path, like, 15 years of his life being stolen. I'm thinking about how lazy, like, and how corrupt, like, our systems are, like, like to not even have to prove
Yeah.
that someone's guilty and then put them away, sit them down for this long.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. I mean, the system is flawed, and I mean, we just witnessing this George Floyd. I mean, we all witnessed this. I mean, and everyone's entitled to a trial, but I don't. In different areas, it's like two sets of laws out here. Um, but over the years, I stayed strong mentally as well, and I became a forceful advocate for my son.
So
And
during, I'm sorry. So during this time, has there been like a community outpouring? Because like I said, like I was shocked to hear about your son, and when I first heard about it, I thought this was a case in Philly. I had no idea that this happened. This happened right here.
right here in Pittsburgh, yes.
Yes, I'm wondering, like, has there been a community outpouring, some sort of support? Like, you mentioned Bill Mushi. Like, what has that looked like and felt like?
Well, Bill Mushi, many years ago, um, he did some footwork in the case, and he had a magazine called Justice Magazine, and he did a 4 or 5 page story on it, and it was called Body of Lies. He was the first one initially kind of like say something strange about this case. And then I had Bill O'Driscoll from the city paper did a story. Then One Hood Paradise Gray. Um, he did a couple of videos that circulated. I mean, it has support that has been helping me just show like this is what happened here, right in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County. Um, you can have there could be no evidence, no weapon. Um, a crackerjack witness that didn't even see nothing, and you can still get 17 years on nothing. So a combination of all of them helping me put the case out there through the years. Radio Rust Belt had did an interview with me before, and so I could say I has been blessed. Lynn Collin had did it. She covered my son's case, and even it been some blessings out here. I will say Bev Smith, she did an interview on her radio show, my son's case. It's just so crazy to them. And they want to know, wait a minute, are you trying to say they admit they never had no weapon, no physical evidence, nothing? So when they hear me say it and then they did all research, we're like, where are we? What is this? And it's still from 2006, now we're in 2021.
Mm, mm. And I can't help but think, and this is, I mean, it's obviously the truth. If this can happen to your son, to Terrell,
Oh, I tell people all the time. Today my son, tomorrow yours.
yeah, or it already was, like I'm
Yeah.
wondering about how many people are locked up for, chunks of their lives or their whole lives for nothing, and not only is it for nothing, but the systems that put them away are perfectly aware that it is nothing, that
Yes.
there's nothing there to convict and take away someone's life like that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just been a combination. I have a friend named Mandy that's been helping me expose this case and sharing and connecting me to people in the media. Attorney Paul Jubis, I seen him on your show. I think, was that a week ago?
A couple weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago. And y'all was covering, actually I was out of town for my birthday, and someone called me and said, Attorney Paul Jubis is on this young lady named Shannon's show talking about this case, but I just heard your name because he's not my son's lawyer, but he knows of the case. It's public record, and it was so strange to him. So when I heard him speaking about it, which I want to thank him very much, and the injustice and unethicalness, and because he witnessed at the evidentiary hearing. Anybody could come to the evidentiary hearing, and he was able to sit in on it on his own, and he probably in disbelief because he got to hear all the witnesses speak about about a guy on foot that shot the young man and went down the alley. Had nothing to do with no car at all. So he sat in and heard this, and he also seen the judge fall asleep a few times.
Yeah, that's
actually out there because it's the truth.
Right. It is, the truth is the truth. And that's actually how I heard about your son's case, was from my interview with Paul. And that's why I thought had to have been in Philly, because I had no idea about it, and come to find out that this is right here.
Yeah, if you ever get the evidentiary hearing, which I have an extra, it's like 120 pages though. And it's the synopsis of the end of the whole case. You'll be in shock, Shannon.
Wow.
Yes, I'd love to give you a copy. Because everything else in the beginning of what we didn't know, all that, it played a major part, but the relevance is what's out now, of what the federal lawyer was able to produce in court, and the footwork that they did along with the Innocent Project. Bill Mushi, thanks for him. It's just really been out there where I don't even have to speak as much about trying to even show the innocence. Their footwork is in black and white. It's speaking for itself.
Yes. Yeah. Shout out to Bill Mushi, Andy Kiewicz, and Paul Jubis being so instrumental.
Yes, very.
And Paradise Gray.
Yes, Paradise Gray has, One Hood, Paradise Gray has really been, from the very beginning, he's been there and still there.
And I want to point out how important that is, that we're sharing and telling these stories. I mean, that's why we have this podcast in the first place, is because violence like that, violence period, has a tendency to get to be successful when there's no eyes, and violence in our systems. They get away with it because people don't know what's going on. So how can the community support you if we don't know what's going on? So the more people that hear and see, the story, hear your son's story, hear you speak, learn about not only what has taken place here, but the corruption and the gaps.
There's a corruption.
Systems, right? The more we know about what's going on in our systems, that prepares us. That's armor for us to actually do something, versus us being consistent victims of a system that's supposed to protect us, that it doesn't, right? As you said, we are watching, the Derek Chauvin trials, right? The man who murdered George Floyd. We're watching that, but also I know we all have that pain in our bodies of, we've been here before, and there's evidence right then and there, and still nothing is in place, right? There's no justice here, there's no accountability anywhere to be found, and that's because we have these systems that can run rampant, but they have folks so disoriented about what's true and what's not, right? Watching people argue about what's true and what's not right in front of our eyes, right? But that's
right in front, right.
Exactly. So the more we share our stories, our narrative is our power. Like that is your power, is our narrative. Like, so continue to share your story. Like continue to share
I
out.
will be doing that.
Anyone who's listening, continue to share this story out because that's where our power comes. Like the power is truly in the people, and systems know that. We don't, like, and there's a reason for why we don't. So I wanted to, off my soapbox, but it's important to say, so I was going to say it. So at this point, so this is where we are, right? There was an evidentiary hearing 4 months ago. All of this wildness that has been suppressed, and unknown is now there all of a sudden.
Yes, in black and white. It's documented.
And now the pieces.
Public records, yes.
So now there's pieces to the puzzle. So what are you all? Where are you all at with this case? Like, what are y'all waiting for? What are you all working on? If I could ask.
Well, we're waiting for the judge, David Cashman, to just explain why he just, because since then, not that my son was denied, but he did file that timeless grounds. That means that it was too much time went past. But I don't want to use it because the legal terminology I may be incorrect. So time went past that he really couldn't really just yay or nay it, but he had to at least explain it. So he had 21 days to explain that, which because we just got were March 3rd. So from there, we could go straight to federal, where I know the federal is a whole different ball game. That's where they apply the law more, and I believe that's where we're going to get rhythm at. The state level seems to be, I can't explain the state level. It's like a state of denial, the state level. So we go up to federal, where it's more civil, violations.
So
that could be avoided if the state level just apply the law or something happens while we're on this level before we go to federal, because a whole different ball game.
Okay, so because this isn't my area, if I'm understanding you correctly, at this state level, you all are waiting for Cashman to explain his previous judgment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is there still an opportunity for it to be overturned or whatever, however that happens at the state level?
Actually, yes. And if it does, then we don't have to go up to federal with all this evidence with the 3 witnesses, because they will look like that. Might if it go upstairs to the federal, and they will even wonder why on the state level, when you heard these witnesses and there's no physical evidence, why does young man at least get another trial? Something's not right, But sometimes when people, judges, could be lawyers, cops, sometimes they just can't admit that they made a mistake, or there's some errors on their behalf. So they just rather just stay strong-minded of just not practicing the law, applying it.
I'm wondering if there's any standards or policies just about conduct. You said this judge Cashman fell asleep during the evidentiary hearing. I wonder, is there any onus on their part? Like, is there any sort of responsibility or accountability there?
I'm wondering that too. That's where I'm at. I'm trying to see how. Yes.
So that's we don't know if there's any sort of accountability there for conduct for judges.
Yes, indeed. Because can you imagine you going to court and you have witnesses that's sitting there making statements of you're innocent, of the alibis for you, and the presiding judge is just nod off that, where they actually have to knock and wake up, judge. That's not fair.
It's not. It's wild. And quite frankly, we've heard some horror stories about judges just really not caring, like not valuing the lives that they're presiding over in that way. But I definitely, if anybody knows if there's any sort of responsibility, accountability, policy, law, something about like how a judge should conduct themselves in a courtroom when they're hearing someone's case or information, I don't see how that would be effective. I don't see how that could possibly be effective.
Yes, because was the witness was speaking. I'm wondering, did you hear the witness testimony? You know, did you hear the exculpatory evidence or the testimonies that was withheld of the man that made a statement 15 years ago that the Commonwealth withheld? I mean, your sleep, and this is very, very important. This is potent information.
Yeah.
So, if there's some type of, I mean, somewhere has to be accountability. I mean, judge or no judge.
Absolutely. And let me remind everyone that we are coming up on a pretty important judicial election.
Yes.
There's like over 20 people running.
Yes.
So definitely check out those folks. There's what is it? Slate of 8, I think that's what they're called. So check them out. Definitely want to check out Tiffany Sizemore is the person that I'm backing. Like that I absolutely.
Judge Tiffany Sizemore?
Yeah, I absolutely. Okay. I've worked with Tiffany. She's supported kids that I've advocated for.
We need change.
Yeah.
We need some change. New set of eyes and ears, some ethical people that's going to apply the law.
Yeah. So at this point, so you're waiting to see what Cashman says or does. You all are planning for, a federal move should it not make any difference.
Yes.
There's no kidway here. What way can the community support you and Joe and y'all fight?
Well, as I keep putting the case out there and being an advocate for Joseph, just the support of people knowing, and when we go to court, to support, like, I don't know how the courtroom is going to be then, but, fill up the gallery showing, the judge that we all seeing this bias, unethical, just decisions that you're going to make. We appreciate it. I appreciate that.
Most definitely. And I want to also press that, again, like visibility is super important. It's our narrative. That's our power. And I'm not the only one with the podcast. I know plenty of other folks who do. So invite Miss Cecilia on. Tell Joe's story, repeat it, share it. Share the stories that Bill Mushi and Bill O'Driscoll have covered on Joe. Do whatever you can to further this story. It is our narrative that is how we do things when they can do them in silence. That's where we experience harm. And so there was harm here, right? Like, so Cashman, I mean, just the fact that he has fallen asleep in the courtroom is wild. That's violent. But the fact that there was evidence that was withheld, that is violent.
Yes.
The things that have taken place in Joe's case is violent. The fact that he was convicted for, what was it, 17 and a half to 34 years or something like, or 35. Yes. Mm-hmm. With no evidence.
No physical evidence. There's an article right now in the Post-Gazette where I was so glad that 2 young men were from the Post-Gazette sitting in the gallery, because they don't want to actually wrote and from the quote of the prosecutor opening his remarks saying that. So that's in a paper that anybody can see that the prosecutor opened his remarks saying that. Because people's like, wait a minute, the prosecutor said this from the beginning. I said, yes. It never changed. So.
Yeah. I mean, like that, like there's documented evidence of there being no evidence here, right? And so, yeah, so like our narrative is super powerful. That's how you move people, right? Like it is the movement of people that creates change. And let me remind folks, like I typically say this, but it only takes about 25% of the community to buy in actively in support of something to create change. So it only takes 25% of us to create change. And keep that in mind. It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot to make things move. It just takes for you to move, right? Like, and if you have family who have been subjected to unfair, bias, violent policing or judicial system, then you absolutely should should, you know, like, and if you're Black, like if you're brown or you're otherwise marginalized, you should definitely take interest, because if it ain't you today, it could be you tomorrow. It could be any of us.
Absolutely.
And then when it is us, right, like, then what do we do? Like, do we depend on the same system that has been marginalized and oppressing us to save us? Like, is that what we're going to continue to do?
Yes.
System that's accountable to no one, not even itself. Like, is that what we're going to continue to do? That doesn't make much sense.
No, it doesn't.
So, before we cut out, Miss Cecilia, is there anything else that you would like to say for people to know? Anything going on? Anything?
I do want to just tell of some people, and they know who they are. I thank you for the continuous support, my family support, William Mushi from the Innocent Project, Attorney Paul Jubis, you young lady Shannon Hughes, I thank you very much. And Paradise Gray, I really truly, this helps me, keeps me strong, it keeps my son strong, because knowing that there's people out here fighting for him, and because he doesn't have a voice but so much, you know. And I'm gonna stay focused, and you will see justice for Joseph.
Yes.
There will be justice for Joseph.
Yes.
Because Mama Bear is still out here.
Yes. Well,
yes.
Thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you and your fight, you know, and I appreciate Joe for his fight. So again, if anybody wants to, you know, support Miss Cecilia, she's Cecilia Coleman on Facebook. Is there anywhere else that you would like people to reach out to you?
No, my Facebook, Cecilia Coleman -Finney. I'm always updating, and they welcome's public.
Awesome.
Friend me, request me. I don't mind.
Awesome. But yeah, you can catch her on Facebook if you'd like to learn more about Joe's case, get involved in any sort of way, have her on your show, do some articles, anything to support this person's freedom. So that'll be it for today. I want to close out to remind us that Janiyah Dawson is still missing. So if you see her or if you see Zamaya, a close friend of hers, please do, you know, notify her mother, Josie Dennison, who is very concerned. We are not looking to criminalize Zamaya or Janiyah. We're looking to make sure that they are both safe. So keep in mind that these are children that we are talking about. If you do happen to see them and want, you know, some advice or support on how to safely intervene or do something, you can reach out to Take Action Mon Valley. You can text 412-440-8268. And that'll do it for today. Thank y'all.
Okay, thank you so much, dear.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.